I didn't sign up for this. Other men are fighting to give me everything, and I'm here living like this?
He pretended to be broke for 3 months. What his wife did next destroyed him in ways money could never fix. Just before the real twist begins, smash like, subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Let's see how far this story has traveled. Charles Mercer stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, watching the San Francisco skyline glitter beneath him like a constellation of earthbound stars. At 34, he'd built Mercer Tech from a college dorm room idea into a $2.3 billion empire. Forbes called him a visionary. Tech publications called him ruthless. His mother called him every Sunday and told him to find a good woman and settle down. He'd done that part. Or so he thought. Vera had walked into his life 18 months ago at the Children's Hospital charity gala, wearing an emerald dress that matched her eyes and a smile that made him forget about quarterly earnings for the first time in years. She'd approached him at the bar, not recognizing him at first, and they'd talked about literature, travel, and the absurdity of $500-a-plate dinners. She seemed different from the usual crowd that circled him, genuine, warm, interested in ideas rather than investments. They married within a year. A beautiful ceremony in Napa Valley. 200 guests. Coverage in 3 lifestyle magazines. Vera moved into his Pacific Heights mansion with enthusiasm, redecorating rooms and hosting dinner parties that became the talk of San Francisco's elite social scene. She was perfect, almost too perfect. The doubt started with his mentor, Richard Blackwell, a silver-haired venture capitalist who'd guided Charles through his first major acquisition. Over scotch at the Olympic Club, Richard had leaned in with a grave expression. "I like Vera, Charles, I really do. But I've seen this pattern before." Richard swirled his drink slowly. "Beautiful women who meet you at charity galas, who slide into your world so seamlessly they rarely love the man behind the money. My colleague James just went through a divorce. His wife stayed sweet until his startup tanked, then vanished within a month. Took half his remaining assets with her. Charles had laughed it off then. But the seed was planted. He started noticing small things. How Vera's eyes lit up when he mentioned closing a major deal. How she'd grown distant the 1 week his stock had dipped. How she'd never had a job in the 2 years he'd known her. Always vaguely mentioning family money that never seemed to materialize into anything concrete. How her affection seemed to spike after he'd bought her something expensive. The paranoia grew like a cancer. He'd lie awake at night, watching Vera sleep peacefully beside him, wondering if she dreamed of him or his bank account. So Charles devised a test. A brutal, elaborate test that would either confirm his worst fears or prove them wrong forever. He spent 2 weeks setting the stage with his attorney and CFO. Fake lawsuit documents, leaked articles to financial blogs about Mercer Tech's catastrophic losses, frozen account notifications. He even had his accountant create fabricated bankruptcy paperwork. Everything looked legitimate enough to fool anyone who wasn't a forensic investigator. On a Tuesday evening in March, Charles came home early with the performance of his life prepared. Vera was in the living room, scrolling through her phone on the white leather sofa that cost more than most people's cars. She looked up with that radiant smile he'd fallen for. "Hey, babe, you're home early. I was thinking we could try that new omakase place tonight. We need to talk." Charles's voice came out harder than he intended. "Good." It sold the desperation. Vera's smile faltered. "What's wrong?" Charles sat down heavily, burying his face in his hands in what he hoped looked like genuine despair. "It's over. Everything. The company, the money, all of it. We lost a massive lawsuit. The board forced a settlement that wiped out our reserves. And the SEC is investigating. Our accounts are frozen pending review." The silence that followed felt like falling. "What do you mean frozen?" Vera's voice had gone very quiet. "I mean, we're broke, Vera. We'll have to sell the house, the cars, everything. I'll be lucky to avoid prison. I've already talked to a lawyer. We're looking at maybe $60,000 left after everything's liquidated and the debts are paid." Vera's face had gone pale. $60,000? Charles, that's not we can't live on that. We can. We'll have to move to a smaller place. I can get a consulting job, use my skills. We'll rebuild. Together. He reached for her hand. She let him take it, but her fingers felt cold and limp. How long have you known about this? It's been developing for weeks. I thought we could fight it. I was wrong. Vera pulled her hand away slowly. I need to process this. I'm going to bed. She didn't kiss him goodnight. The first month was revealing in small, horrible ways. They moved to a 2-bedroom apartment in the Sunset District. Charles had actually purchased it through a shell company, but Vera didn't know that. To her, it represented a catastrophic fall from their mansion in Pacific Heights. The apartment was perfectly nice hardwood floors, updated kitchen, a small balcony with a view of Golden Gate Park. But to Vera, it might as well have been a prison cell. I can't believe we're living here, she said on their first night, looking around with barely concealed disgust. There's only one bathroom, Charles. One. It's temporary. We'll rebuild. You keep saying that. She turned away from him, scrolling through her phone. Always her phone lately. Charles had taken a fake consulting position at a mid-sized tech firm, leaving early and returning at normal hours to maintain the illusion. Vera, he suggested, might want to look for work as well. Her reaction was immediate and sharp. Work? Charles? I wasn't raised to work some minimum wage job. My family? Your family hasn't sent us a dime since this happened, Charles pointed out, probing gently. If they have money, now would be the time. Vera's jaw tightened. It's complicated. You wouldn't understand. She refused to look for employment. Instead, she spent her days in the apartment, going out occasionally with friends she never named. The affection between them evaporated like morning fog. She stopped touching him casually. Those small, intimate gestures that had dotted their marriage. No more quick kisses when he left for work. No more curling up beside him on the couch. She'd sit on the opposite end, as far away as the furniture allowed, radiating resentment. The complaints became constant. The apartment was too small. The neighborhood was too loud. Why couldn't he have been more careful with the business? Why hadn't he seen this coming? Didn't he care about her at all? Charles absorbed it all, watching, documenting, hoping desperately that she'd prove him wrong, that she'd stand by him, that love would surface beneath the disappointment. It never did. Month 2 brought darker revelations. Vera stopped even pretending to maintain their home. Dishes piled in the sink. Laundry went unwashed. She'd order expensive takeout somehow. She still had money for that and leave the containers scattered across the coffee table. When Charles asked about it, she'd snap that she wasn't his maid. I didn't sign up for this, she said one night, her voice cold as winter rain. You promised me a life, Charles. A real life. Not this. This is real life for most people, Vera. Well, I'm not most people. She started going out more frequently. Dinner with friends. Drinks with old college roommates. A spa day that Charles knew they couldn't afford. When he asked how she was paying for these things, her answer was always the same. My friends take care of me. Unlike you. The implication stung, which was irrational since none of this was real. But the test was revealing her truth. And that truth was ugly. Charles came home one evening to find Vera getting dressed in the bedroom, wearing a cocktail dress he'd bought her during their honeymoon in Paris. Designer heels, diamond earrings. She looked stunning and completely out of place in their modest apartment. Where are you going? Out. She didn't look at him as she applied lipstick. Out where? Does it matter? You'll just sit here feeling sorry for yourself anyway. She grabbed her purse, also designer, also from their previous life. Don't wait up. She came home at 2 a.m, reeking of expensive wine and cologne that wasn't his. Charles pretended to be asleep, but his mind raced with possibilities he didn't want to consider. The criticism intensified. His clothes were cheap and embarrassing. His car, a 10-year-old Honda he'd purchased for the ruse, was humiliating. Why couldn't he get a better job? Why was he so useless? Other men would have protected their wealth. Other men would have seen this coming. Maybe you were never as smart as everyone said, Vera remarked one morning over coffee, her voice dripping with contempt. Maybe you just got lucky, and now the luck's run out. Charles felt something crack inside him. Not because the words hurt, he knew they weren't true, but because this was who she really was. This was the woman he'd married. He'd just been too blind, too hopeful, too desperate to believe in fairy tales to see it. Month 3 brought the final, devastating confirmation. Charles had started coming home at irregular times. testing whether Vera was really alone as much as she claimed. One Thursday afternoon, he left work early, driving back to the apartment with a sense of dread pooling in his stomach. He climbed the stairs quietly, key ready. As he approached the door, he heard Vera's voice from inside. She was on the phone, and she sounded animated, happy in a way she hadn't been with him in months. Charles pressed his ear to the door. 3 months of this hell, I swear. The apartment is disgusting. He's disgusting. Walking around in his cheap suits, pretending we're going to rebuild. Vera's laugh was sharp and cruel. I know, baby, I know. Just a few more weeks and the divorce will be finalized. My lawyer says California's a community property state, so I'll still get half of whatever's left, even if he's broke now. Could be a few million once they liquidate everything. Charles's blood ran cold. Then we can finally be together. No more sneaking around. No more pretending. A pause. Of course I don't love him. I never did. You know that. It was always about the money, the lifestyle. But now he's got nothing, so what's the point? Another pause, then a sultry laugh. Yes, I'll meet you at the hotel tonight. The Fairmont. Like always. God, I can't wait to be done with this nightmare. Charles stood frozen in the hallway, his worst fears confirmed and somehow still shocking. She wasn't just a gold digger. She was a cheater. A liar. Someone who'd been playing him from the very beginning. And he'd been too smitten to see it. But now he saw everything. Charles pulled out his phone with trembling hands and started recording. Then he unlocked the door and walked inside. Vera was in the bedroom, sitting on the bed with her phone pressed to her ear. When she saw him, her eyes went wide. I have to go, she said quickly and ended the call. How long? Charles asked quietly. How long? What? How long have you been cheating on me, Vera? Her face cycled through expressions: shock, calculation, then defiance. I don't know what you're talking about. I heard you. Just now. On the phone. Talking about your lawyer. About the divorce. About meeting someone at the Fairmont. Charles held up his phone. I recorded it. All of it. The color drained from Vera's face. Charles? Who is he? It's not you don't understand. Who is he? Charles's voice cracked like a whip. Vera's defiance crumbled. His name is Derek. I met him at the gym 6 months ago. Before any of this happened. It wasn't supposed to be serious. But then you lost everything. And he was there. And he actually has money. 6 months. Charles felt nauseous. You've been cheating on me for 6 months. You were always working, always at the office, always on your phone, always putting the company first. Vera stood up, anger flashing in her eyes. What was I supposed to do? Sit around and wait for you to notice me? So this is my fault? You know what? Maybe it is. Maybe if you'd been a better husband, if you'd paid attention to me instead of your precious company, none of this would have happened. But you lost it all anyway. So I guess it doesn't matter. Charles took a deep breath, centering himself. This was the moment. Everything had led to this. Vera, I need to tell you something. What? She crossed her arms defensively. I didn't lose everything. There was no lawsuit, no bankruptcy, no frozen accounts. Mercer Tech is fine. Better than fine, actually. We closed a $200 million deal last week. The stock is at an all-time high. Vera stared at him. What are you talking about? It was a test. All of it. The apartment, the fake job, the poverty. I staged everything to see how you'd react. To see if you actually loved me or just my money. Charles felt surprisingly calm now. And now I know. The silence was deafening. You're lying, Vera whispered, but her voice shook. Charles pulled out his real phone, the expensive one he'd been keeping hidden, and showed her his bank account. The numbers spoke for themselves. Then he pulled up recent news articles about Mercer Tech's successful quarter. Vera's legs seemed to give out. She sat back down on the bed, staring at the phone screen. This isn't real. You're messing with me. I'm not. It's all real. The $2.3 billion is still there. It always was. Charles pocketed his phone. But here's the thing, Vera. Remember that prenup you signed? The one you barely glanced at because you were so eager to marry rich? Her face went white. It has an infidelity clause. If either party is unfaithful, they forfeit all claims to marital assets. I have recordings of you admitting to the affair. I have phone records showing hundreds of calls and texts to Derek. I have hotel receipts my investigator pulled, yes. I hired an investigator showing you meeting him throughout our marriage. You don't get the house. You don't get a settlement. You don't get community property. Charles, please. You get nothing. Vera's composure shattered completely. Tears streamed down her face. But Charles couldn't tell if they were real or another performance. I'm sorry. I made a mistake. I was weak. Please. We can work this out. I do love you. I do. I was just confused and angry about the money. About money that was never gone. I know, but I'll change. I'll be better. Please, Charles, don't do this. Don't throw away our marriage over one mistake. 6 months isn't one mistake. It's a pattern. It's a choice you made every single day. Charles felt surprisingly little satisfaction in this moment. Just exhaustion. I've already had my lawyer draw up divorce papers. You'll be served tomorrow. You have 1 week to move out. Where am I supposed to go? I believe Derek has money. Try the Fairmont. Vera's tears turned to rage. She lunged at him, screaming obscenities, clawing at his face. Charles backed away, and she collapsed on the floor, sobbing and cursing him in equal measure. The woman he'd married had become a stranger. Or maybe she'd always been a stranger, and he was only just seeing her clearly. Charles walked out of the bedroom, out of the apartment, and into the San Francisco evening. His phone buzzed. Richard Blackwell. How did it go? You were right, Charles said quietly. About everything. I'm sorry, son. I really am. Me too. 3 weeks later, Vera was gone. The divorce moved quickly once Charles presented the evidence. She contested nothing in the end, probably realizing any fight would only make things worse. Charles heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd moved in with Derek, some hedge fund manager with more money than sense. He wished them both the best, and he meant it. They deserved each other. Charles stood once again at his office windows, watching the city lights flicker in the darkness. He'd won, if you could call it that. He'd kept his fortune. He'd avoided a disastrous divorce. He'd learned the truth about someone before it could destroy him completely. But he'd also lost something irreplaceable. Not Vera, he never really had her, but the ability to trust. The capacity to believe that someone might love him for who he was rather than what he had. That innocence was gone, burned away by a 3-month test that had revealed more than he wanted to know. His mother called that Sunday, like always. How are you, honey? How's Vera? We're getting divorced, Mom. A long pause. Oh, Charles. I'm so sorry. What happened? I learned that some people don't love you. They love what you can buy them. Not everyone is like that, sweetheart. I know. But how do you tell the difference? His mother was quiet for a moment. That's the hardest part, isn't it? Trusting again after someone breaks you. But closing yourself off isn't the answer either. You'll find someone real, Charles. Someone who loves you for you, I promise. Charles wanted to believe her. He really did. But as he stood there in his penthouse, surrounded by wealth that had bought him everything except genuine love, he wondered if the cost of being a billionaire was always going to be this loneliness. This suspicion, this knowledge that he'd never truly know if someone loved him or his money until it was too late. The test had saved him from Vera, but it had also changed him in ways he was only beginning to understand. And sometimes, Charles thought as the city glittered below him like fool's gold, the worst part about losing everything wasn't the loss itself. It was discovering that some people had nothing to lose in the first place.